less than 2 hours, liquor will be declared illegal. Prices will increase 20-fold.
Nucky Thompson, there isn't a single business he doesn't get a piece of.
Those in the know say you're the man to see.
I suppose that depends on what you want.
On Volume 2 of the HBO sessions, we're delving into the illicit world of prohibition, 1920s Atlantic City for Boardwalk Empire. Back with us to discuss the Emmy Award-winning series are Chris Laverty, editor of CloseOnFilm.com, Georgie Hobbs, cultural critic and journalist, Ben Boyer, senior content and commissioning producer for Sky Atlantic, and Edmund Weil from the Nightjar. Chris Laverty opens the discussion on the iconography of gangster chic and the era of the dandy gent.
The costumes in Boardwalk Empire are so authentic. John Dunn's work was it's near obsessional. He even had fabrics respun just so they could be completely accurate. And you've got to remember that it's 1920/21. It's not the 1920s, it's not the roaring 20s. So back then, for gangsters, it wasn't so much seen as okay to dress like that. It was actually aspired to. You wore these clothes to show that you were a gangster. And the more colour you could take, the more plaids you could take, the more of a gangster you were, really. And I think what's unusual for us, because we're used to seeing this era in black and white. So when we see all these gangsters in these colourful shirts, like Nucky with his saffron silk shirt and his red plaid jacket and his two-tone shoes, we see it as, wow, it's quite dandyish. I didn't realise, but that's what it was like back then.
No, oh, come on. You shouldn't have. Now, who planned this?
Nucky?
Jesus.
Nucky's one of my favourite costume characters on the show. I just love all the little details and his kind of signature iconography. He always has a blood red carnation on his lapel and his Homburg hat. Because he's one of the only people in the show that actually wears this hat, you can watch the whole thing squinting and you still know it's him. It's his look.
I remember there's that scene where in the synagogue and Al Capone is still wearing his cloth cap and this guy's like, oh, you have to keep your hat on in the synagogue. Anyway, why are you wearing a cloth hat? You look like a kid.
It's referred to as the hat of a boy. I think it's like the manual worker's hat, the flat cap. And when he gets the fedora, the same as when Jimmy gets his fedora, it's when he becomes a gangster.
And they both start wearing seriously sharp suits as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though they only have, in the first season, Jimmy only has one good suit.
Yeah.
We see him cleaning it at one point in it. So this was something that we're not very used to now in our throwaway culture, that you buy a suit, one really good suit, and you look after it.
I do look after my TK Maxx big and tall blazer. But yeah, it's incredible to me that every character down to Jimmy and Angela's little boy is so well dressed. I practically wanted somebody to show up in sweatpants and flip-flops just to make me feel better about myself. But it's, you just think, gangsters, as we think of them today, what happened, you know?
Ben Boyer explores the characters, cinematography and visual tones of the gangster epic and the Scorsese Connection.
Any show that's going to approach gangsters, it's going to have the specter of The Godfather and really a legacy of gangster movies hanging over it. So I think it was important for Boardwalk to establish its own visual sense. The show's got this incredible color palette that they revisit throughout the series, and depending on where they are, there's a different set of colors and tones to the thing. The filmmakers actually created a boardwalk where the storefronts have actual interiors to them. It's a big living and breathing set, which ties into the show.
I think the casting is really inspired to have Stephen Graham from Liverpool playing Chicago's Al Capone.
Yeah, it's a fascinating touch, I think, bringing Al Capone in at this stage. And,
Well, his introduction, when they're both just like the drivers outside, and he's like, how much do these guys make? And they're just having a chat. And he's like, what's your name? He's like, Al Capone.
Hey, let me ask you something. A guy like Rothstein, what's a fellow like that worth? Him? 10 million at least. On the level? He's as big as they come. Christ, Luciano's sitting on $500,000. I know that for a fact. Got a spread on Park Avenue.
Casting all the way around is amazing. I mean, the real Nucky was based on a guy who was, by many accounts, 6'4" and 250 pounds, this mammoth guy. And Steve Buscemi is so good in the role that he can seem that big at times.
I think what's good about Steve Buscemi being kind of a wiry person, I suppose, is that you get that sense of having kind of a tough upbringing. And I think that being kind of wiry and a bit kind of scheming is what he really brings to it.
Yeah, and also being someone who is sort of physically fairly unprepossessing, and yet it has such enormous charisma and that allows him to essentially manipulate an entire city.
I thank you all. God bless America.
The pilot of Boardwalk Empire was, of course, directed by Martin Scorsese, and it's this incredible, lavish, $18 million pilot, and every cent is on screen. Bringing Scorsese into the mix actually makes perfect sense. I mean, on a surface level, he's kind of the guy you think about when you think of gangster stuff, but he's also a filmmaker who likes to play with and explore the idea of the language of cinema informing life and vice versa. And on a meta level, Boardwalk Empire is very much a show that's about storytelling.
Edmund Weil from the Nightjar enlightens us on speakeasy culture, moonshining, and the illegal drinking of the early 20s.
From an alcoholic point of view, you know, what struck me, the wide range, the authenticity and the accuracy with which the people who've made the show have represented the time, the drinking.
So what exactly did they drink in these speakeasies then? Was it just watered down whiskey or...?
First of all, it really depends on what kind of speakeasy we're talking about, because they run the gamut from, you know, the very best types of bars or the kind of whorehouse that Al Capone and Jimmy do their business from, and also by the geographical location. So, you know, places like Chicago would have been flooded with Canadian rye whiskey, whereas if you were trying to run a speakeasy in Florida, you'd be drinking Cuban rum.
Boats unload liquor sailed down from Canada, up from the Caribbean, across the Atlantic. It is watered down, mixed with poisons, and sold illicitly by a growing class of criminals for whom murder is a means of doing business.
I think you get that sense in the programme of the two classes of gangster. You get that guy who is from Eastern Europe who changes his name to an Irish name, and he's the one who is selling moonshine and puts formaldehyde in it. And he's just like the cretinous and just useless gangster.
And he wears a bowler hat as well, which makes him look even sort of darker.
The way those guys play off of each other, and of course he's got that great line where he says, you know what's great about the Bronx Zoo? There's the bars between you and the monkeys. I mean, it really is all about how these guys, these businessmen and politicians who were businessmen and politicians first, had to get in bed with these horrible dirtbags.
I understand you're interested in the liquor business.
The interesting thing about cocktail culture during Prohibition is that actually we've got a lot to thank Prohibition for around the rest of the world, because whilst cocktail culture died a death in a way, because the quality booze wasn't there in a lot of places, the great bartenders of the late 19th, early 20th century kind of had a diaspora. So you've got places like Harry's Bar in Paris, people like Harry Craddock at the Savoy, and basically a lot of the great cocktails of the Prohibition era were actually devised in London or Paris or even Venice and places like this.
Our guys landed some Atlantic city-sized luck as the Nightjar's barman Luca devised a phenomenal cocktail from some supremely special liquor.
Yeah, basically today we're gonna make kind of one of the mother or father of the cocktail culture, which is the Manhattan. Manhattan used to be kind of heavy and sweet on the same times, because many years ago, when they used to drink it, people they used to go just for a quick drink on the bars or something like that. So in this case, Manhattan used to be a different recipe. We do have some really old products like gin-based or rye-based. So today we were choosing something rye-based. Back to 1863, our rye, we're gonna start with some bitters, a little bit orange curacao. Those days they were definitely getting inspiration from any part of the world, even a European or something. So orange curacao, nice orange liqueur from Caribbean, from Curacao Islands. Little bit of vermouth. Now in vermouth there is a little bit to say. You know, vermouth many years ago used to be wine-based spicy, but a little bit sweeter, so lots of vanilla, maybe coffee flavors. So in this case, it looks like Martinez because the amount of vermouth inside is more than actually the rye. Always a little dash to prove the customer we're really taking care of them. So, and a nice 18, if I'm not wrong, 63 or 65 rye whiskey. As we know, speakeasy bars, they used to be very quiet on the basement, so really nobody used to shake in those days, not to make noise. So stirring was kind of the quickest way. You should pick up from your drink just the main flavor. So in this case, we do have some nice chocolate and spices, orange flavor, rye whiskey, bitter. So very simple and complexity at the same time. So we're gonna do a little twist of lemon. Now we're gonna garnish kind of in the modern way, because we belong on Nightjar, which is a bird. We actually bird in all the garnishing. Enjoy your Manhattan, gents.